Welcome to Clay Mastermind with Don Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab, your ultimate podcast for mastering the mental game of clay shooting and gaining exclusive insights from the top minds in the industry. Join us as we dive into the strategies of elite athletes, uncover the secrets to peak performance, and share powerful techniques to enhance your shooting skills. Plus, get behind-the-scenes access to the leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of the clay shooting industry. Get ready to elevate your game, sharpen your focus, and gain insider knowledge from the best in the business. Let's get started. Here's your host, Don Grant.
All right, folks. Super excited to have Andrea Seefeldt Knight here. And those of you that are newer to the sport may not know the miraculousness of this woman, but some of you do. But I'm really excited for her to share her story and her journey, not only in clay shooting, but in other areas as well. So thank you for being here, Andrea.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very flattered.
Thank you. Well, I always like to just do a brief synopsis up front and, some of your accomplishments and highlights that will intrigue the listener to want to hear more. So what are some highlights from Andrea's life?
Well, before I got into the sporting clays, earlier in my life, I was a professional jockey, and I rode 6,200 something races. I won 605, so I won at 10%, and I lost 90% of the time that I rode. I rode in the Kentucky Derby. I was the third female to ride in the Kentucky Derby. A couple years later, I was the second female to ride in the Preakness. My biggest win was 1991 Pennsylvania Derby. At the time, it was a $100,000 purse. Now it's $1 million purse. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. And you are a clay shooter. So this, we will be. Yeah. So I guess just a quick synopsis on that. And then I'm going to take folks back and we're going to get to know how this all happened for you.
I guess the highlights of my clay shooting was 2019 ICTSF World English Sporting in Ireland. I was lady runner-up there, probably because none of the top of U.S. lady shooters were there, but we had some of the UK shooters and a couple other. I've been a perennial All-American in several different feat tasks, sub-gauge, sporting, the Krieghoff, mostly in the feat task. 5-time Maryland State Lady Champion, 7-time runner-up, multi-state lady champion, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. The 2012 National C-Class V-Task, I won that in a shoot-off, and that was exhilarating. That was really cool.
Oh, nice.
And then I've had a bunch of local HOAs, mostly in 50-bird feet tasks and 5 stands, a couple in sporting, 100. And the best one, though, my favorite one, was at the East Coast Championship. I actually was on a squad with Jeremy. And
Okay.
feet task, it was a miserable weekend. I tied for runner-up with Grace. Runner-up overall, the high score was 93. John Truitt and some other guy, and Grace and myself and another guy had news.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's go back to your youth. Were you competitive? Were you athletic? Like, how did you get started in these particular lines of sports?
I guess I just found my way there. I was not brave. I was very shy and naive, but I loved horses. My mom said my first word was horse, and we really we'd got into the show horses, and I loved doing that. And my brother and myself, we both did it. And our parents were full professors. They really didn't make much money. They were hardly ever home. We were latchkey kids. We learned how to take care of ourselves. We couldn't really afford it. My brother got a job at the racetrack first, and then I followed him. And 2 weeks at the racetrack, because I wanted to ride show horses. I thought I'd be a jockey during the week to pay for the show horses on the weekend.
Okay.
And 2 weeks at the racetrack, I sold my show horses and decided I wanted to be a jockey.
Wow.
And once I put my mind to something, I'm going to do it. And
Yeah.
I didn't, at that point as well, I didn't know that female jockeys were not, that was 1980, 78, 79 when I started on the racetrack. Women had only been allowed to ride for 12 years since 1968, Title, was it 8 or 4 or something like the act, where women could compete with men and in college kind of thing. And so women, it was always like the second or third generation of female jockeys. So I didn't realize what I was up against. Because in the show horse world, it was mostly female riders and a few men. So I thought a good rider is a good rider, and I knew there weren't many female jockeys at the track, but I was like, well, I'm a good rider, and I'll make it.
Yeah.
And that was my attitude.
That probably naivety helped you as far
Yeah,
as the not
absolutely.
knowing, right?
Yes, correct.
For
Young and
sure.
dumb. Young and dumb.
No, I mean, just not realizing that it was a new sport for women to be able to do. You didn't have that mental barrier of thinking you
Correct.
couldn't do it, which
And
is super cool.
my mom was one of the original feminists back when it had a different definition, women's liber. Their fight then was equal pay, equal rights, equal work, equal pay. And so I believed I could do anything. And it's funny, she wanted me to do anything, but when she found out I wanted to be a jockey, she wasn't happy with that because she kind of thought scientist, doctor, engineer.
So how does it start unfolding for you? Did you dive right in and start practicing all the time? And
It was hard to get somebody to give me a chance to get on actual racehorse. I was a hot walker at first. After they exercised, you need to cool them out, lead them around the shed row. It's the menial job of the barn. And then it took me a good year before I got somebody to give me a chance to get on a horse. But actually, I went to a different state where nobody knew me, and I walked around with my helmet and whip and said, "Oh, I'm an exercise rider." And of course, everybody could see I was an exercise rider. And one guy gave me a job, and I got to get on one horse a day, and it was the quietest horse he had in the barn, and I was a groom for 5 other horses. So it worked really well. So I learned to ride on this really nice, perfect ride. And then I came back to Maryland, and I got a better job with another outfit, and it kind of just got on more horses. And then freelanced, which is I didn't have a set job. I just got on jump horses for a bunch of other people. And guy decided to give me a shot. I wanted to be a jockey, and he gave me a chance on my first horse.
wow. And how did that go? Your first competition?
We finished second, and
That's
it was really incredibly exciting. She might have should have won if she had somebody a little bit more experienced on her. The craziest thing about it was before the race, it was a 12-horse field. We were in like the 3 position, and he went over the race and every horse in the race with me where they were going to be during the race. And the number 2 horse is going to be here. The 7 horse is going to be laying second. The 4 horse is going to be there, and you're going to be right between them. And then that one's going to be, but when the gate opened, nobody was where they were supposed to be. And I had that brief like, oh shit. And then, but the horse didn't wait for you. They're going, they're running, and you've got to move and react. And it was just all reaction from there out. And I passed a lot of came from out of it, passed a lot of horses, and came on to finish second. But I was really weak finishing right about then. My legs and my wind were giving out. So I wasn't a very strong finisher at all.
another potential mental barrier expectation as far as them pre-deciding how this is going to go. And you just kind of proved that there was like what?
Yeah, there was a moment it's like, I think nobody's where they're supposed to be. And, it's like being on a fair ride. The ride doesn't stop and wait for you to decide. It's all moving, and it's all moving quickly.
Yeah, and you got to be able to
react,
go with the flow. Yeah, in that moment. React. And one of the things, I've not a horse rider. I've been around them a bit, and of course, here and there, maybe on a vacation, rode a horse or something. But I love that intuitive connection between the human and the horse. Like there's this true intuition happening there, and of course, the horse is going to respond to that mental energy of that moment. So you have to even let that go, I would imagine, very deliberately clear your mind. Right.
In the race, you just don't really have time to think. You're mostly reacting. And again, you have a plan of how you think the race is going to go. And you can have plan B, and you can have plan C, and 8 out of 10 times, it isn't going the way you thought. And you've just got, and the trainers will give you what I call destructions. They call them instructions. But the problem with that is they would put something in your head, well, you need to do this and do this. And when you're out there, that's not happening. You need to react quickly. And if you stop to think to try to do it their way, you've lost your opportunity to maybe take a chance and go for make a hole, run up in a hole, rather than trying to do what they said. Just go ahead and react and do it. And that's kind of the difference between the really good jockeys and the not, is the top jockeys will go ahead and take a chance when needed and say, look, boss, I know you told me to do A, but if I didn't do B right then, we were going to finish nowhere.
For sure. I love that about it. And how that carries over to clay shooting or really any other sport is being able to be in that moment, right? And shoot instinctively, shoot intuitively, even
Yes.
if you had a plan initially. And let's kind of tie these together. So let's say your coach or your instructor is almost like shooting with your instructor in a squad who shoots a pair a certain way and thinks that's the way to do it. But then you're up and you go with your intuition and you shoot it differently, right? And that's what you've got to be able to do is trust
Yes.
yourself and in that moment and what you're bringing to the table. So I could see how those carry over. And I imagine having a good coach with your racing, they had to understand that that was part of a successful process, right? And not to be upset with you. How did that go?
It went, most of the times it went well. But in the beginning, if something went wrong in the race, it was always the girl. Other trainers, I'd go by their barn and they'd say, "Oh, I can't ride you. You bothered my horse yesterday. Joe Blow told me that you shut us off." I'm like, "Really?" Well, I was last the whole way, so I don't know how I could have done that. The trainers also they couldn't. The jockeys get fired a lot, even if you didn't make the mistake. The trainer has a hard time going to the owner who just paid $100,000 for this horse and saying, "Well, your horse isn't good enough, so you can blame the jockey."
I could see that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
The downfall person. Oh, what do you call that?
scapegoat.
Scapegoat. Yeah.
We got fired a lot. You had to have thick skin. I grew a thick skin because you could win on a horse and get fired.
How is that?
How is that? So maybe Preakness Day, there's a horse you've been riding and won several in a row. And on Preakness Day, he's in a big stake race. Well, the best riders in the country are here. So who are you going to ride? The local leading, even if it wasn't me, it happened to local leading jockeys as well, male. When the big guys are in town and the big guys open in that race, they're going to put the top name on the horse.
All right, I'm really confused then. So you could have...
So going to the Nationals and we're shooting on teams, and you can pick Derek Mine, or you can pick somebody's up in Connor Daniel. He's I was going to use Turner, but he's already he can do it. So Daniel, you see him as being a top winning the Nationals in the future.
Yeah.
You've got Derek Mine, and each one of them you got to pay your entry fee to get in there.
Yeah.
So which one to win is your teammate?
So, but is that rider just hanging out, waiting to get hired? Do they just
they're there for the day. There's 10 races on the card. They came in to ride the Preakness, and they want to ride races in between because it's the $100,000 purse day where they're gonna make a lot more money, and they don't want to sit in the jocks room all day and wait for the race. They want to be amped up and go in and get a feel of the racetrack for the day.
So, what's the percentage of time that a jockey will get fired on that day and replaced? How?
Oh, that's pretty high on the big days.
So you just kind of know, like you're going to ride or not ride.
Yep.
Depending on how much money the owner has or whatever. Interesting. All right. So you're moving along. When do you start shooting shotgun?
Well, I was on the farm after I retired. I had show hunters and fox hunters and that kind of thing. And I was on the farm one day and there was a rabid raccoon. I don't know if it was rabid. It was really sick. It was July. It's rolling around in the driveway. And it was headed towards the houses and the barns where my in-laws all lived, and the kids were getting ready to come home from school. I knew it needed to be disposed of, and I called every man I knew with a gun, and nobody answered. And I didn't know. We lived on the farm at the time. I found my husband's shotgun and the box of whale and dove shot. And there's a picture of a little bird on the box, and I wanted to kill this thing. I don't want to piss him off because it's just a tiny little bird. I didn't know that quail and dove shot would have killed him, but so there was a pistol there and a loaded magazine, and I was able to actually kill him with the first shot with the pistol. But I talked to my good friend who's on the farm as well, and her husband, nobody's home, and she wanted to learn how to shoot. She had a friend that had a clay thrower machine, and he lined up a guy that had been to NSCA level 1 to give us lessons. Group of us, 5 or 6 of us, would meet once a week and get a lesson on the clay shooting, on the thrower, and we loved it.
Oh, wow.
And then it ties back to coming out of retirement in 2010 and riding that race and finishing second. And after the race, I had that feeling, gosh, I want to be a jockey again. Well, at that time, I was 48, and I'd already broken my back, my neck, my collarbone, my tailbone, torn my kidney, broke my pelvis sacrum. 48, and I'd have to start over again at the bottom and ride all the bad horses to get to the top again. So the wise person inside of me is like, no, 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 no. The addict inside of me realized I needed something to train for, because I'd been going out every morning, getting on horses and getting fit and training and a goal. It's like, okay, what can I do? I really like shooting. I wonder if there's competitions. And a friend of mine said, yes, there's an instructor, Anthony Matarese, go right to him. So I got really lucky right off the bat to go to Anthony.
Right.
And that's where it started.
Nice.
So I
nice.
replaced one addiction with another addiction.
Okay. Well, most people can relate that are listening. Okay, probably all of them that are listening.
Yes. It is an addiction.
Yeah. So you start shooting, you start getting instruction, so you didn't even mess around. And
got lucky.
Yeah. So when did you compete? When was your first competition?
I think, well, I rode him, like 2 days after the race. I was like, I need a lesson now. And he was on summer break in New Jersey, and I think I called and left a message, and he did get back to me, and he found a spot in the middle of the summer. So that, tided me over. But then I didn't get another lesson until probably the next year. But I did go to one small tournament, and I loved it. And it was a lot of fun. Then I got on his books the next year, and I think I went once a month. I was lucky that he wasn't as busy then, and I could get there once a month. He was busy, but not as busy.
Right.
So it was right, good timing.
Yeah, nice. So where is that your closest club? What club do you go to regularly?
It is not. There's closest to home is Lochgrave and Skeet and Trap, which it has a 5-stand, which I go down that road. I ended up managing it and setting the targets and designing the course and fixing the traps and all that kind of thing. But there's another local one, a private club where I teach as well. Pennsylvania, there's Warrington and Central Penn, about an hour away. It's about an hour and 15. Hopkins is an hour and 45. Probably 20 clubs within 2 hours.
That's the thing about that area, right?
Yes, yep.
It's
close. Everything's kind of close together.
Yeah. Joe's club was one of the ones I know that you'd gone to for competitions and all that.
I went and actually had a couple lessons with Joe during the summer when Anthony was away one year.
Okay, yeah. Nice. So what are you doing in your day-to-day life now?
Now I'm really backing off of things. Like I said, I was managing the 5-stand at Lochraven. I was setting the targets and repairing the targets, and totally managing it. It's a not-for-profit, and everything's volunteer. When I got on the board, it's a skeet club. And I'd say, I need this, I need that. And they said, well, it's all volunteer. If you want it done, you have to do it yourself. So I learned how to set targets. I did take Anthony's target setting course, and I had taken it before I started at Lochraven just to learn more about shooting. And so I set the targets, and that took a lot of time. We had 15. It started, there were 6 traps that worked. I got a bunch of donations. We had 16 traps, working traps, and had some covered stands made, and would change the course around, and they just paid no attention to it because, you do what you want to do down there. I was like, okay. So then people started shooting it because I had targets 1 through 4 were easy, novice, where I could teach beginners. 5 through 10 were a little bit harder, and the teens, 11 through 15, were really hard targets. So people started shooting and having fun, and better shooters would train there, and it kind of so it started growing. And now they're looking at putting in another 5-stand and adding on and everything. And I resigned because I just can't do the work anymore. And I was like, well, I am going to. It's me. It's like, yeah, but that's all me. I've done all this without any help.
Right.
And a couple guys have stepped up, and they are doing all the work, and they're doing a good job.
Nice. So what period of time did you just recently stop doing that?
Yeah, about a year ago.
Okay.
I was on the board for 6 years, and it was just got to be too much work. And it was, my neck hurt so much I couldn't pick up the batteries, and I couldn't bend over, and I've had had a lot of injuries, and I just couldn't do the physical work. My thumbs don't work very well anymore. They're worn out. Okay. So it just got too hard physically to do.
I could understand that. I could understand having a club myself and knowing what goes into everything you just mentioned. It's a lot of physical work.
It's a lot of time and physical work.
Mm-hmm. Even the trap maintenance.
Yeah, the trap maintenance. I learned more about traps than I wanted to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unless you have something to lift them up, then you're down there and like on your knees or whatever trying to work on them. It's hard on the body.
And the traps we had, there's manual tilt, and you like put them on a block, and
Yeah.
I saw some of the nationals with, they put them on a bunch of, so I get a good dome on them. I could put them on a bunch of blocks and use a ratchet strap and tie them to the ground.
Right? So how much are you shooting? What competitions do you like to go to now?
I'm pretty much still shooting every weekend. I'm not traveling as much. I listened to the Wendell and Diane, and it was nice to hear them say they're getting tired of traveling. I traveled a lot as a jockey, traveled all over the country, and curious though, we would fly in and fly out the same day. When I first started this and traveling to shoots, I would fly in the same day and have stuff scheduled in the afternoon, and I never did very well.
Right.
So I learned to go the day before and get a good night's sleep and those kinds of things. And flying messes up your vision, really. And that's really why you couldn't just fly in and fly out on the same day.
Interesting, though. So would you say in modern day, jockeys still fly in and out on the same day, or do you think
Pretty
that
much,
they've learned?
unless you go to the other side of the country.
Wow,
Because you have to be
that's
back at work the next day if somebody else is taking your job.
tough industry.
Yeah, the only vacations are when you got injured bad enough that you couldn't come back to work.
Wow. And now I can see flying out on the same day because you can sleep
Right.
or whatever on the
Yep.
plane, but
Yep.
holy cow, flying in on the same morning,
Yep.
that's rough.
Yes.
That's rough on the body, as you're seeing.
Well, we were
obviously, with the clay
young
shoot.
as well doing it, so you can do
Mhm.
whatever you want when you're in the 20s and it not really affect you.
Yeah. I mean, something as simple as dehydration, that absolutely does happen when you fly.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, interesting. So we would say, and from your experience, don't fly in on the day that you're going to shoot, right?
Exactly. But I still do it because it's, I get there, some places I'll shoot something that, like a sub gauge in the afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
something that, not the main event or anything, but, and have low expectations just to get acclimated kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, so what events do you like to go to now?
Well, I loved going to the Nationals. I went 10 times, but I did not go this last year. It's getting too hard to get away with the animals at home, getting house sitters. Well, I don't need a house sitter. My husband's still here, but trying to take care of all the critters because he goes to work at 5 o'clock and gets home at 6. So the dogs have to be taken care of. And I'd have somebody that's reliable, but then all of a sudden when I went to Ireland the day before, Ireland and England for 2 weeks, the day before, the girl told me, "Oh, I'm not going to be here this week." I'm like, "What?" So it's been too stressful to go away and get somebody to replace me.
Yeah. So what animals do you have?
3 corgis, 3 barn cats, and I did have a horse and a miniature donkey. The horse, he was 28 and he died last year. But I had and I thought I was kind of going to get out of horses, but I had the miniature donkey, and it was kind of hard to ship him somewhere. He's been here 12 years. So I found him a babysitter. I've got a naughty pony that keeps him company and every once in a while jumps out and runs home.
Wait a minute, a naughty pony. All right, so when it babysits, so you're saying he lives down the road and he comes and hangs out
Well,
with
he's living here now, but he wants to go back and see there's some Shetland pony mares at the old home.
That's fun, though. So looking at your time as a jockey, your time in clay shooting, and so as a jockey, that was your profession, right? Or did you have
Yes.
other work along this journey?
No, there wasn't time for anything else.
Mhm.
That you are a professional athlete, you get paid well. You don't get paid for the morning exercise. You go out in the morning, training hours are 6 to 10, and you go see as many trainers you can and get on for free for them horses, work them, working them is going racing speed. And they really only do that once every week or 10 days, kind of like football scrimmage. You can't go, their legs don't hold up to going fast all the time. And when they go work, they want to put the jockeys on to keep exercise riders are usually a little bit heavier because they're trying to keep the horses slow, and the horses are very strong, so it's easier for them to keep them from running off. I was a terrible exercise rider. They all ran off with me, and that's probably why I was a decent jockey. Most of those ran off with me, too, in the races.
What? Why is that?
Some people they would say it was electric ass. Like as soon as you hit the saddle, the horses wanted to run off. I know there's just some people that I don't know. I guess I learned early on as well as an exercise rider that my theory is that it takes 2 to pull, and they were going to outmuscle me eventually. So I would just kind of let them run off for a little while, and then they'd slow down and settle into a decent pace.
Did that make you nervous, or you were just used to it?
Used to it. I don't know how, but I was fearless then because I was 18, 19, 20, couple years old. Towards the end, when I was getting to 30, I guess after 25, the frontal lobe you lose that, the benefit versus risk kind of gets a little bit, and I'd had injuries. So by the time I got to 30, 32, your brain gets bigger and the heart gets smaller.
Would you say that you were or are an adrenaline junkie?
I didn't think that until I came out of retirement and rode that race and realized, oh gosh, I need more. I need the adrenaline. I need competition. And the shooting gave me that.
Yeah. Well, I mean more of that. The horse is going and you're just along for the ride.
Basically, yep. And you hope they stay between the fences.
I don't know if this is a good example or not as an analogy, but the way that I can feel like I can somewhat relate is I do like sports cars. And so, not only do I have one, Joe has the TRX, so it's got, a lot of horsepower and all that. But I've also test drove different cars. And one of the ones I test drove before I got the one I have now, it was a Maserati 2-door little sports car. And it's fat. I don't even know the horsepower compared to what I have now because I like the feel, right? I like the ability of that car to be super responsive when I need to pull into like I-95 or something like that, or get out of the way of a possible accident. Like I really like the responsiveness, instant responsiveness. But what I have noticed, like with the Maserati, was it was so small and so light feeling. Now I was coming from a Challenger, which was bigger and heavier. But the smaller light feeling made me just feel what I would call anxious in my chest, like just the test drive of the ability for that thing to go fast, but not feel like I had total control, made me not want to ever drive it again. So you know what I mean? And that's what I'm thinking about when the horse is like, what'd you call it, electric ass or whatever?
Yeah, when they're running off with you,
you don't have total control. You have some, but not total, right? And I don't think I would like that feeling.
Looking back, I was meek, mild, naive. I don't know where it came from, but apparently it was in me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the races felt like slow motion to me. There were a few where when you were totally out of control, that was really frightening. I mean, it was, you're totally out of control and they're headed for the outside fence and you can't turn them. And they actually had one run into the outside fence with me. And I tried to bail off, but it's hard to bail off with something going 40 miles an hour.
What the hell? Now you're reminding me of snow skiing, which is another thing.
Yeah.
I don't like that feeling either of, maybe hitting an ice patch or the slope is so great that you don't really feel like you have a lot of control, but you're going fast. Like, I don't like that feeling. I'm going to do the bunny slope.
I went snow skiing and I didn't like it either. But on a horse, I was fine.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, knowing your mind and the type of brain that you have and what you've been experiencing, do you see the parallels between being a jockey and the clay shooting and how that's either helped you or even hindered you?
They're quite different, but it has helped me in a lot of ways. I think I did well when I didn't start shooting at all till I was 46. And, that's supposed to be well past your prime. And I did I did pretty well in the beginning. And, I credit that to being with Anthony and, his break point, hold point, get the gun on the flight path and look at the target. Don't think, just let it happen. And I trusted him and I'd look at the target and they'd break. Until then, I was like, oh, what did I do? And I tried to do it. And they wouldn't break because I was trying to do it.
It was the think part.
Yeah, don't think. Just look at the target. Let it happen. So, and I think also my brain, I don't know if you ever think about myelination and how your brain, so as a jockey, you're going 40 miles an hour. You've got two horses inside of you, 2 horses outside of you, 4 in front of you, and 6 behind you. You need to know where they all are. You need to be, I was able to look, see left and right of me while looking ahead of me and judge what the horse next to me is doing. You're right on top of how close you can get the one in front of you without getting tripped, clipping heels. Your horse's front feet are reaching 3 feet, 4 feet ahead of them, while the horse in front of you, their back feet are extended 4 feet. So you're in tight and you've got to, so it's make a decision of which way to, so I'm behind 3 horses in front of me. They look like they're going even. and you decide which one to follow. Hope they continued running so you can follow them to get through. And it's just like an instantaneous decision. And it just, so going 40 miles an hour, my brain was able to judge speed, distance, and how close I could get which one, where I should go instinctively, kind of. And I think that helps my brain just look at the target. And when I just look at the target and I trust, I'll break them.
You're helping me gain a great appreciation for horse racing, because what you just said, I've not ever stopped and thought about all of those details. Holy, no wonder it's so dangerous, because you can be in that moment and have a general idea of all those things that are happening.
Moving pieces.
Anything can happen in any one of those elements at any time.
Yes.
Different and the same to race car driving. This was years ago, but Dale Earnhardt Jr. Was in a crash, and in the interview afterwards, he was like, "Totally my fault. I absolutely take the blame. My mind wandered for a brief moment."
Yep.
But when you're going, like, kind of like what you just said, if you're in a race car and you've got all these cars around you and you're going, I don't even know, what are they going, 200 miles an hour? I don't even know.
Way too fast.
Something crazy.
And they ride really tight.
And that moment of the conscious mind thinking about anything at all, going back to Anthony's point, and any other, top shooter or instructor know this, you can't think, right? And when they say that, it's you can't think consciously. The conscious mind is a really slow processor. It's very analytical, and it's just your subconscious mind is not a slow processor. It's instantaneous, but your conscious is a slow processor. So if you're bringing that in, willingly or not willingly, and it's thinking about something, you've lost a moment of time, and that's what Dale Earnhardt Jr., and he was taking credit for it as far as the accident, because he knew his mind had wandered in that moment. In his ideal state, when he's performing well, he's totally engaged, just like you would have been as a jockey, but also as you are when you're doing your best as a clay shooter. It's just totally being in that moment. And it's, in my opinion, easier, not that it's easier either way, but it's easier when things are high-paced or, when you have to be present because things are constantly happening around you and you have to be in that moment, or it's high stakes, meaning I've already learned my mind wanders. There's going to be a pretty serious consequence. Like, in some respects, it's easier to keep your mind present than, let's say, sporting clays, where it's 3 pairs, 2 of the same thing over and over again. That's not like high intensity, high detail, gotta be engaged or else bad things happen.
There's an ambulance following you. It's not an ambulance following you.
That monotony of those pairs, though, and that repetition actually encourages the conscious mind to just do whatever, wander off, get too detailed. And it's one of the reasons people like fee task more than sporting clays.
And 5-stand. And myself, and I think it's why I excel at those over sporting.
Yeah, because it's that captivating the conscious mind and keeping it engaged, which puts it on a good job instead of, what it could do otherwise. But
that reminds me of early on. There was I was at an event at M&M. Been there, a couple hours, and on the 3rd parkour fee task, I'm au pair coming at me, crush the first bird. And I need fresh water for the dogs. Crush the second bird. And I'm like, what the heck? What? Where'd that come from? I've been here. No, I mean, like, who was that? Where'd that come from?
I know.
Stay out of my head.
It's such a stinker, that conscious mind.
Yeah.
Like, you have to stay on it. Yeah, very, really interesting. So that was a positive kind of carryover. What would you say has been a challenge as far as a carryover with the mind of the jockey?
Well, the no time to think in the racing, and there's too much time to think in the sporting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, the negative is my old injuries and recoil.
Another
So,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why 5 stand and feet task are easier on my body, because it's one pair at a time as opposed to 3. I loved going to Vero Beach, but I think they had 5 pairs, and I just can't. I was 5 stand. I was runner up. I think to Bill McGuire in veteran class. When we get to sporting, 5 pairs in a row, I'm okay first 2 pairs. By the third, fourth pair, it's not just my mind wanders. It's my brain's like, this hurts.
Yeah. It does hurt, huh? So most of those injuries, was that during your practice time?
One was in morning work. A horse flipped on me at the starting gate and broke the pelvis and sacrum. And the rest were in races.
Wow.
And separate events. A lot of people did all at once. I'm like, oh no, I broke my back and went back being a jockey for 10 more years. And in the meantime, broke my, something else. And when you're 18, that's another part of the brain though, too. When you're 18, when I first started, there was a jockey had just gotten killed and there was a jockey that had just been paralyzed. And my brain is like, well, it happened to them. It's not going to happen to me.
Right.
18-year-olds, your brain the frontal lobe isn't developed. There's no fear. There's no reasoning. That's why you can't get tattoos or drive a car and drink till you're 18, because you're young and dumb. And that's what I was.
A few other controversial things right now.
Yep. I don't not make good decisions. And when I broke my back, it was funny though. I was been riding for about 2 years, and I was in the hospital, and they said I had compression fracture T7. Well, that doesn't sound that bad.
Right.
And the nurse came in the next day with the newspaper, and the headline's like, Seefeldt breaks back. And I'm like, I broke my back? I broke my back? Because I could still move and everything, and it didn't hurt if I didn't move.
Right.
But and I couldn't wait to be a jockey again. I was like, I can't wait till I can. And I hated going to the races and watching somebody ride the horses I had been riding, and couldn't wait to be a jockey again. When I broke the collarbone in '91, I was 28. When I broke the collarbone after that, it was kind of like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I can make another comeback. That was about my 7th comeback. But I did have, when I broke the pelvis, I had the awakening. It was about halfway through. I'd been riding about 8 years, and I hadn't been very successful. And at the time, somebody put in the nice guy, I'll never forgive him, article in the Washington Post back when racing made the newspapers. Seefeldt breaks pelvis 2 for 86. Which is, I'm like, why did you have to put that in there? But and I got thinking, well, I hadn't been very successful. I'd just been kind of average here and there. I was riding, but I only rode the bad horses that other guys didn't want to ride. But I was happy to ride. I wanted to ride.
Right.
And I'd won enough races that it, kept me addicted and wanted to keep going. You win a race and it erases all the bad races before, kind of just like a tournament. You have a good day, you feel good. You have a bad day, you want to quit. But so I was like, okay, if I'm going to be, what else am I going to do? So I don't know. I have to go to college and figure out what I want to do. Okay, I'll get some shitty job in an office and then get in a car accident and break my pelvis. So I may as well be a jockey.
Right.
So, what I did, how I got better was the best rider in the country happened to be in Maryland at the time. He was an apprentice, Kent DeSarmo. He was on record. He set the new 450 wins in 1 year. I was like, well, what's he doing different than all these other jockeys? So I watched and I studied him. And I was like, I would go in a race. I'd go in the gate. I didn't say, I'm going to do what Kent does. I'm going to be Kent.
Nice.
I'm going to be Kent. So in the race, and then all of a sudden, and I would ride like he did. And I would kind of just, didn't have to think about it. I just started doing what he was doing. And the horses started running. And a bunch of times he was right next to me in the race, and then he'd smooch his horse, and his horse would go on, and mine, I was kind of out of horse at that time, but it just taught me how to ride better. And then I just got an opportunity to ride. It started winning races on more horses, and then it snowballed.
That is a great mental technique, and that's really cool that you figured that out. When I was seeing people more in my private office, that was a hypnosis technique that we would do. So what happens for a lot of people is when they want to, especially if they're competitive, right? So they're competing against people, and usually somebody doing better than them, they just end up jealous or frustrated or resentful or something.
Yes.
But if you could flip it and go, okay, so who do I look up to in this sport? what are the qualities that that person has that I admire? That's because that's really what you're jealous of. Like
Yes. Yep.
you're really like frustrated because they can do this, 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 and at that particular time you don't think you can. But if you can like neutralize your mind and go, all right, what is this person doing that I'm not doing? And let me learn from it. And then you
Yes.
can take it one step further and visualize it, which again, that's one of the things I used to do with clients is actually, well, imagine that person in front of you and you can kind of pretend, well, first of all, you want to acknowledge, like, what are the aspects of this person?
Right.
Super confident, right?
Yep.
Believe in themselves, believe they can win, like showing up
Yes.
with a knowing. There's all these things. There might be some physical or mechanical things. You acknowledge those things, you're excited about them, and then you can actually step into that person's body, or you can kind of imagine that you're capturing those types of things. And what does it feel like? Like, what does it feel like for me to believe I'm going to win, to come in with confidence, to come in knowing I've won 400 times this
Yes.
year,
Yep. Yep.
What does that feel like, and so you can practice feeling that and experiencing that, and then being sure to implement that same feeling when you're about to race or when you're about to shoot. So that's really cool, Andrea, that you had done that and that you saw the results of it.
Yes. Yes. Pretty drastic, pretty dramatic.
Yeah. So have you implemented that concept with clay shooting?
Well, yes, I've listened to every podcast, I've read every book, watched every video, and mostly I wish Anthony's book had been out when I started. The literature then didn't quite go with what I was learning from him, so I stopped reading anything because what he was teaching made a whole lot more sense and worked. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I did all that and watched everybody. I shot when I traveled around. I'd enter and I'd enter in, but I'd ask to be squatted with a pro shooter, with a top shooter. And Lois would put me with. I mean, I got to shoot with everybody, and Will Fennell, and learned a lot shooting with Will. He'd give you a couple of valuable tips here and there. Will Fennell, Drew. The only person I hadn't shot with up until 2 years ago was Wendell Cherry. I got to shoot with like pretty much everybody and watch them.
Oh,
And just
nice.
learn from osmosis. And yeah, I think so.
I love that. That was very deliberate and sounds like it paid off
A lot
for
of
you.
people get intimidated, like, oh, I was like, oh no, I'm going to learn from them. I'm watching what they're doing. I'm going to see what I can pick up and do, be them.
Well, and I think it's also important to say that you're not them either. Like you have to pick and choose
Right.
and
Find something that works for you.
works for you. Yeah, not just try to emulate exactly. I think, well, I know, I've heard people over the years be like, oh, well, Wendell, he's so methodical and he's got this very detailed pre-shot routine. And obviously, he's right on the time limit. And they think, oh, well, he's successful doing that, so I need to do that same thing. And that's not what it is. Like you can pull some aspects of it, but integrate it with who you already are and what works for you. Because not everybody is, and we just talked about this on, I think it might have been Derek's podcast. It was actually, I think. But not everybody performs well when it's really slow and methodical like that, right? Like
Yes.
some people are more quick to the shot. And
Look at Brandon and Mike Luongo and Jared Rumor, who I shoot with, and I shoot faster too, so I don't have time to think.
right. That's a big part of it, of what's
Yeah.
happening when somebody's shooting faster. Going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, when there is that time, meaning with report pairs or, several pairs, there is the opportunity for that conscious mind to just do things it shouldn't be doing,
Yeah. I call it me, myself, and I.
Yeah. I'm in the field of psychology, and up until, whatever, 10, 15 years ago, I was under the belief if you have voices in your head, then you're crazy, like you're sociopathic, right? But no, not anymore. I realize we all have voices. we have voices. Which one you going to listen to?
Yep.
Yeah. And you had done some of my mental training at some point as well.
Well, that's kind of another curious thing. I remember when I first started, I was training with Anthony. I was doing well and done a couple local shoots and had done well. And the first big shoot at M&M was like the seafood blast. And I was so, I was excited because I was going to win E-class for sure. And I started shooting, and all of a sudden I'm shaking. I'm actually shaking and sweating. And I was like, what the? I mean, like, what is this? Because I took a nap before the Kentucky Derby. There were 150,000 people there, 4.5 million people watched it on TV. If I made a small mistake, the people that bet money, the horse doesn't win, or, doesn't win. The people that bet money on you lose their money. The owner and the trainer lose money. There's an ambulance following you. And the ambulance isn't there to really take care of you. It's to get you off the racetrack so the next race can go off on time.
Okay.
And I took a nap before the race. So it's, and here I am at this shooting. It doesn't hurt anybody if I miss a target but me. Like, it doesn't really matter. If you hit or miss them, or if you win or lose, it doesn't really matter. Of course, we want to win, and the pros, it matters to them and the people making money. But so it does matter, but the only person that hurts is me. Why am I shaking?
Right.
And that's when you were starting out in this game, and a bunch of the guys were knocking you because, just probably because you were a woman, but they were knocking you. And I was like, well, let me see. I need some help because this isn't going to work. And your mindfulness really made a difference. I still think of you now when I find myself rushing to get out of the house. I'm like, slow down.
Right.
Because I want to pick up and carry everything with me in one trip. And I was like, okay, well, if you look at all these things and take your time, make sure you're actually holding on to them, you can probably do it in one trip. But if you just rush and grab and go. So the mindfulness, the breathing techniques. And I want to tell you, too, another curious thing about the breathing and the fight or flight. I teach a lot of people. I've got 2,500 hours teaching. I've learned from Anthony. I spent 200 hours with him. So and audited lessons, and I've learned a lot. So I had, everybody goes into fight or flight. Everybody. I had 14 FBI guys, SWAT guys. And when they're getting low, we just get a basic lesson on how to, hold points and look at the target. And when I went to shoot a report pair, I kind of went into my beginner spiel. Well, now everybody, when we load 2 shells, you're going to go into fight or flight. You're going to miss this one, hit that one, or whatever. It's just expected. And every single one of them did. And they laughed at themselves because because they realized they did.
Right.
And it's just curious that they did. And I just also recently had a retired Baltimore City policewoman who I took my concealed carry class with. And she was very methodical teaching. And here's this scatterbrained woman trying to load the shotgun with the shell backwards. And I'm like, how did this woman look at this air? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. She's in fight or flight.
Right.
I was like, Joanne, you're in fight or flight. She stopped. She says, oh, my gosh, I am. So she did her box breathing. The military police teach that. And that calmed her down, but it still wasn't quite out of it. And I have found that yawning, and I've heard other people say that, but what I've figured out, and I've done my internet doctor, Dr. Internet research, the vagus nerve. So when we're in fight or flight, if you yawn, it will kind of get you out of the fight or flight.
Nice.
And I go that back to the prehistoric man because, the man's out hunting and fishing or whatever, and the woman's in there watching the kids. And I also want to say it's kind of with women, I think we have eye dominance issues because we could see this saber-toothed tiger off in the woods to the right and the child's on the left, and we're right now focusing on skinning the meat to cook.
Right.
So if you're running from one of those saber-toothed tigers or for your life, you're not going to yawn.
Right.
So I think yawning triggers the vagus nerve to turn off the fight or flight because you're not in actual danger. And she yawned, and then all of a sudden she was back, and she was very calm and was able to shoot and hit targets.
And ironically, or not so ironically, if we go back to what you had said, you used to take a nap before you would jockey a race. And yawning and nap, right? So
yes. And I yawned in the paddock. I didn't, and people would get upset. Look, our jockey's yawning in the paddock. I'm like, I don't know. I just had to yawn.
As a thing. Yawning's a fascinating thing to study because they are still learning about yawning. But I love that you figured that out about the vagus nerve and all that. There is absolutely a connection. And you're right. It's like 2 sides of the spectrum. You got anxiety is overthinking. It is a physical reaction to this mental misuse of your mind, if you want to say. And then the other spectrum is the absolute no use of your mind. You're going to sleep, right? There's tired and sleep over here. There's 2 different things. And actually, if you then also right now parallel that with the beta, alpha, theta, delta. Delta is sleep. Yawning is associated with sleep. Beta is up here with your conscious mind's overthinking and overanalyzing. It's, again, the opposite side of this spectrum. So beta is where anxiety would occur. Anxiety doesn't occur when you're half awake, half asleep, because you wouldn't be going to sleep. You would be back up in beta, right? Overthinking things. So it all absolutely ties together. But I love that you connected that, but then also suggested to her to yawn and then saw the results of it. That was positive.
Well, I've seen that with myself, and I will, shooting, I do my in between, I'll do the breathing exercises. And I think since I listened to the focus loop one, and like in Dubai, I couldn't sleep at night. And you had told me that it would be 15 minutes of listening to that was like 3 hours of sleeping or something.
Right.
So
yes.
I would listen to them while I was trying to sleep, and maybe I don't think I ever slept. But now, even if I just think about listening to them, it gets me into that calm, slow everything down, slow the heart down, and be here, be focused, and be mindful.
That's like Pavlov dogs, right? So
Yes.
you've trained yourself through
Yes.
association.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious to pick your brain on one last question here, and that's related to women winning high overall in short sporting clays at a major event. Like, what's going on there that you feel like that may not have happened yet?
I think it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first started, it's what I asked Anthony. I don't understand why women, this is not, like being a jockey, strength did matter.
Right.
It did matter. You had to be strong and you could get fit enough. And I knew 2 women jockeys that were far better than the men, and they made it to the top.
Right.
So it can be done. It just, there weren't many. And he said it was numbers and the shooting that there aren't. And now we're getting to the numbers part where there's enough young girls that are starting young and shooting the volume that they can. Karen Miles has shot the volume. I'm coming with it. Gianna, got a lot of young girls coming up that have shot the volume since they were 8 that can do it. I think we're not going to be as consistent, I think, because of hormones. I think our eyes, our eyes are really the most important thing. And the women's eyes, our brains work different. I've done Richard Kohler's eye dominance test for every person I teach. And I kept a database, and because when I first started, all the guys, you would hear them say 5% of women are left eye dominant. And when I started doing the test, I'm like, I'm not seeing that.
Okay.
I'm not seeing that. And so I crunched the numbers. I don't, exactly know how to, not a scientist, but
Right.
I went back and watched the videos, make sure I diagnosed the people right, R1, 2, 1. I came up with 10% of women were fully right eye dominant, and 10% were fully left eye dominant. So 80% of us are somewhere in the middle.
Interesting.
Not fully one or the other.
Okay.
This is going to be controversial with, Ed Lyons and Colo, but I think women's eye dominance can shift hormonally monthly.
Okay.
So our hormones do affect our vision. And I have had women that, come regularly. I had one that came for a lesson, and she was tested left eye dominant, and she was beginner, so we shot left-handed. And she came back another time, and like, she's shooting off her right eye. She's shooting left-handed, but and I had her close her right eye, and now she's hitting targets and do the test again, and she was right eye dominant.
Right.
And I asked Colo or somebody about that. They said, no, that's not possible. Like, well, and so then I started asking, what time of the month is it?
Yeah. I think that's a great question to be asking.
It correlated with our eye dominance issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think, we have, that's, kind of keeping, I think the top women kind of shifts a lot more often than the top men.
Well, and men,
it's harder for us to be consistent. And our brains work, like I said, back to the prehistoric. We're looking out the left side of our eye, keep an eye on predators. We're looking out the right side, we're looking for where the children are. Is kind of, I think that's a little bit plays into it.
There is absolutely something to be said about that. Being a woman,
we're different.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was a man, I think the assumption around women and hormones is that they just basically get moodier, right? I mean, that's probably the summary. But being a woman, I have observed I absolutely get tireder right before my cycle starts. I absolutely get colder as well. Like there's a good day or two where I am cold. Like if I'm sitting down at nighttime watching TV, I'm going to have a blanket on me. And I don't always make the connection because I'm not
Right.
like it's only after I go, oh my God, of course. Now I know why
Yeah.
I was cold for 2 nights, but there's other things too. Like there is the emotional aspect to it. And so why wouldn't there not be other physical things going on that I just haven't taken the time to look into? But it sounds like you are diving into it a little bit there related to
Well, because
eyes.
it affected me, and I'm like, what the heck? Why today? Why can't I shoot well today? And now, 2 days ago, I shot fantastic. And mentally, I don't feel like I did anything different.
Yeah. That is one of the most valid points I think I've heard from everybody I've asked that question to. I'm on
Thank
that
you.
one. I can see that one because otherwise everything else seems to be equivalent, right?
Right, right. You don't have to be strong to do this. You can get fit for it. You do need strength, you need stamina, but you can get fit for it.
Yeah. When I
Like,
interviewed Ashley, we talked about this topic a little bit, and she did talk more about the maternal side and more of like juggling multiple things. But I would say the maternal ties into female and hormones. And yeah, you've got me thinking now.
good.
I like your where you're heading with that. I'd like to. You're still getting and gathering that data. You're still noticing.
I am. Actually, I
Yeah.
haven't crunched it in a long time because it's math is not my subject, but I still am taking because yeah, I do. I'm interested in that since I suffer from eye dominance issues.
Well, and coming from a woman that was one of the first female jockeys in a male sport, and here you are in what has been a male-dominated sport, and you figured out a way to be up there and win as a woman, and I think that you come from a good place to be understanding what could be happening here that's different in the sport for the women versus the men. Not that it can't
It's
happen, though.
Yeah, it's just the eyes and the shooting, it's a challenging game. I mean, it really is. It's really difficult. Get the technique and understand the technique you need for which targets and to look at the target and let it happen. And then if you're on a roll, now you've got the pressure of you're doing well. If you've only missed a few, and now you've got pressure on you, and you have to handle that. Or the day that you're struggling, you have to keep in it because there are days that I've shot with Jared Rumor, and he was not shooting his best, but he kept trying, and he had an 89 and won by 2 targets. So it's like it's a tough game. You have to have the technique, and you have to have the mental part.
You're reminding me of another analogy, and that's years ago, there was a guy I was working with who was looking to get on the PGA Tour, but he was from overseas. He was like from England, and he had just moved to the States. But he had grown up competing in and professionally playing football, soccer, right, over there. So he came from being a professional football player to wanting to be a professional golfer.
Oh,
And
wow.
we're talking about that time again, right? You've got instantaneous decision making, being in the moment, years and years of performing that way, and then coming over into something where different from clay shooting. You've got, you're going to tee off, and then you're going to walk for a while, and you're going to hit the next ball and the next shot. The amount of time to think is huge. If you take what we've said about the clay shooting, just multiply that many times over with the amount of time you have to think versus instantaneous, reaction.
Well, I do, like been between stations and as a jockey as well. The hijinks in the jockey's room were incredible. I mean, we all goofed off and we played pranks on each other, and it was, later I realized that was a stress relieving. We'd even go into even in the starting gate, and you'd be messing with the guy next to you. You just a lot of mind games too.
Yeah.
But as soon as, the gate went off, then you were engaged. But it was actually when they said one out, last one out. So there was one more horse to load. When they said there was one more horse to load, that's when you got tied on. That's when you got as much mane in your hands as you could hold on to so you don't roll off the back when they leave. And you're looking looking straight down the track. And that's when, so shooting, I kind of goof off a lot in between as well. I try not to distract others, but it's just the way I am. But once I get in the cage and I do my last mental cue of they say, okay, now it's time to focus. I can't always do it, but that's what I intend to do.
Yeah. Great. That's great. And that's what I would suggest actually, being in the moment can also be being in a moment and having a good time and joking with somebody, like because you're still not thinking of dinner and you're not thinking of previous station. Like you're having a good time with your squad mates and busting it out and joking around. Like that's a really great way to be in that moment also and lighten things up and not think about your misses or not think that you're in the lead or not, all these other pitfalls, and then be able to then take that in the moment into the stand.
Just remind me that one routine guy, he was playing a football player and he said, the brain is a dangerous thing.
Right.
But don't let it think. Let me just go unconscious, be instinctive.
Right.
But that's another thing that makes sporting clays very challenging. You do have to do a lot of thinking in your setup, a lot of thinking and planning and then execute, but without thinking while you're doing it. You have to turn off the thinking and then go instinctive.
Very good point, Andrea. And I think one that isn't broken down enough, because I think there's probably confusion to the naive person who doesn't totally understand the mental game. They're like, well, I'm not supposed to think. Well, no, but I'm being told over here to look at the show pair and analyze like the break point and all these other things. And it is a balance. Like you've got to be able to, that's the proper use of your conscious mind is on the front end during the show pair. And then you go in and you've got to, you do the reminder during your pre-shot, but then you've got to be done. You got to let go and you got to be able to trust and do it instinctively. So it's a dance between.
Well, I'll say to some of my students, Yoda, try not but do.
Yeah.
Once you say pull and when I'm practicing too, I'm like, shoot, I was trying to look at the target. I wasn't just looking at the target.
Yeah. Lovely. Great information, Andrea. So is there one magic piece of advice, wisdom you'd like to pass on?
Well, we touched on it. Yawn.
Oh,
Go ahead
okay.
And, breathe between stations. If you feel anxiety, you feel the adrenaline pumping, and you're feeling, just do your breathing, get you calmed down, and then yawn a deep enough stretch that even you can fake yawn. You can just start. I'm gonna yawn now because we're talking about yawning.
I know, right? Yawn's one of the contagious things.
Yes.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, I do want to let the listeners know I have some free goodies for you guys, whether it's my mental training access or my Mind Mastered app, or even at my shotgun club, Amelia Shotgun Sports. You just go to dawngrant.com/free. And Andrea, you're still doing instruction. Yeah.
I've cut back.
How can people get a hold of you? Okay. Zig Ask, ASK.
Andrea Seefeldt Knight. Yeah.
Okay. One at Gmail. Yep.
And Zig was my jockey nickname. They couldn't say Seefeldt. They said Ziegfeld, and it got shortened to Ziggy.
Oh, okay. All right. I like that. Then that's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes.
And you're in the Pennsylvania area?
I'm in Maryland. Really close to Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. And do you have any shout outs?
Of course, AIM Shooting School, Bear Pelt, Briley Manufacturing helps me out. Wayne Morgan at Morgan Optical, and Shoot SP, which is a little nifty thing that helps some people with eye dominance issues.
Okay, nice. Very good. Well, folks, come see me and you can shoot some Joe Skull targets at Amelia Shotgun Sports. We're in Northeast Florida. Andrea, I really appreciate this. I love that we got a bunch of your good info out there. And, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on Clay Mastermind with Dawn Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab. We hope you found today's episode inspiring and informative. Remember, mastering the mental game is key to unlocking your full potential on the course. And through our conversations with industry leaders, we aim to provide you with valuable insights into the world of clay shooting. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share it. For more insights, training tips, and updates on upcoming events, Dawn Grant and Amelia Shotgun Sports are on all social media platforms. Go to dawngrant.com and come shoot at Amelia Shotgun Sports. Stay focused, stay driven, and keep pushing your limits. Until next time, Dawn wishes you success and happiness on your journey to peak performance and industry mastery.